Statement of EmersonTurnkin, found in your mock trial book on pages 52, 53, and 54. My name is EmersonTurnkin, or M for short. I was the site supervisor at Franklin's Trench on August 31st, 2012. Anyone who calls that disaster an accident is a fool, or has been fooled. Those people were knowingly sacrificed to Tatum Zilius's raging ego and insatiable pocketbook. No matter how much money Tatum throws at this, the blood that forever stains the site will never be rubbed away. It wasn't supposed to be like this for me. I was supposed to be something so much more. I wanted to be a property developer, but now I'm 53, single, unemployed. I have a degree from Penn State in construction management and 30 years on job sites, but no one will ever give me those jobs again. It all started out well, too. I built a reputation the way I built a house, brick by brick, each one carefully laid on the next. I didn't always get things done the fastest, but I had a pristine record. It was basically the opposite of the way Zilius did things. His reputation was clear. Speed meant profit, and extra speed was worth paying a few citations. People used to joke that he was going for the Guinness record for most citations without actually getting shut down. When we worked together on the trench, I often heard Tatum saying, "Fast means good, fast means profit." That was the culture. I'm talking about dangerous stuff too, like unsecured scaffolding, unlocked equipment, and heavy machinery that should have been serviced months, if not years before. Cutting corners was less expensive than playing by the rules. When Zilius approached me in 2011 about working on the trench project, I confronted him about the fast means good policy, which was a concern. But he told me that all was in the past and promised me complete job site control. I made up my mind that I was going to do everything right on this project. I was going to adhere to every code and refuse to cut corners. It was the safest site in the city. I would spend at least 2 hours a day on safety protocols and sweeps. We barely had a stubbed toe on our site. Fighting Phil was erected in September 2011. What a thing of beauty. I'd never seen a crane that big, much less worked with one. Micah was the best crane operator I have ever met. Regardless of weather, time, or temperature, he knew how to get the most out of Fighting Phil. The one big problem that everyone had overlooked was a group of squatters living in Franklin's Trench who refused to relocate. They felt that they had a right to be on the land and that we were invading their property. I decided to humor them and meet with their self-proclaimed leader, London Packard. He wanted us to stop construction and move the entire project 2 blocks east. Unfortunately, I couldn't control my temper. Instead of diffusing the situation, I blew up at London and accidentally started a bit of a feud. I tried to brush it off, telling myself that the squatters were harmless. The only problem was that they started vandalizing the site, which made it very, very hard to stay on task because we had to keep red flagging, stopping work, to do safety checks. Mostly, it was little stuff like graffiti or moving some markers or digging holes in the heavy machinery track. But it slowed us down, and every delay was a strike against me and made my job harder. On January 10th, 2012, everything changed. Tatum came by the site, and after a few minutes of pleasantries about the new year and how pretty the site looked, Tatum began a tirade that went on uninterrupted for at least an hour. The pinnacle of the rant was when Tatum stared right at me and said, "I don't care if people get hurt. We can pay for that. We can pay for anything but time. This project is going to get done." He watched us like a hawk after that. My safety checks were cut, then cut again at Zilius's direction. Even worse, the workers were offered an extra hour in each day. Those who didn't want it didn't last long, although mostly people liked the overtime. Soon, Tatum started a second shift without even asking me, so now I was running a 16-hour site alone. Accidents increased tenfold, but Tatum didn't care. In April, when the final weight totaled on the state-of-the-art roofing panels came in, it was 200 tons over the maximum load limit for the crane. Micah was convinced that Fighting Phil could handle it. I'd already lost control of the situation, so I just told him to sort it out with Tatum. A week or so later, Micah came back to me and said that he had spoken to Tatum and that Tatum was aware of the risk, but had told Micah to proceed as planned. I knew it was a mistake. These were no ordinary roofing panels. Not only were they heavier than expected, the shape of the design was unique, and they had these wind turbines built into them, so the weight wasn't evenly distributed. I knew Tatum was aggressive, but this was beyond negligent. It was reckless. Over the next few months, the site was beyond tense. Tatum was there daily, and every day I would get yelled at for the project being behind schedule. One day in May, I saw London and another mole person mucking about the mooring area of Fighting Phil. I managed to scare them off, but it didn't raise a serious concern. I was worried that they were plotting something, but I couldn't tell what it was. I checked out the crane, and everything seemed okay. I didn't bother mentioning it to Micah, but I did relay the information to Tatum, who seemed as disinterested as ever. He muttered something like, "I don't think we have to concern ourselves with a bit of graffiti, do you?" I guess he had a point. London and his gang's efforts were annoying but harmless. In June 2012, things got really intense. Tatum decided that he needed to be on site 24 hours a day. First, a third shift was added, and then overtime became mandatory. The breakneck pace was taking a toll on the workers, but there was a bonus deadline looming in October. The building was getting done, but the haphazard approach was dangerous, and Tatum knew it. Even though we'd put up a fence, squatters were still milling around, and tools were being left everywhere. During our morning meeting one day in early August, I bit the bullet and confronted Tatum about the huge risk we were taking. Predictably, he said, "Remember, my dear M, if we don't finish fast, we die. Nothing you can say can change that. Now, go make yourself look busy." After that, honestly, my heart wasn't in the work. I stopped caring. Mostly, I just sat in my office at the end of the site, mindlessly signing paperwork and sorting through the junk mail while I waited for this nightmare to end. I still had one fear, though: the big lifts at the end of August. Shortly before they were scheduled, Hurricane Isaac hit the Gulf Coast. I was terrified, not because of the danger it posed for the workers, but for the fact that if the torrential rains came before the roofing panel was in place, months of effort would be lost. Tatum was determined to get the overweight roofing panels in place before this happened. It was all hands on deck, and the lift was going to proceed at all costs. I tried to have a rational discussion with Tatum the night before when we saw how bad the weather was going to be, but Tatum was having none of it. On the morning of August 31st, Reese's article on the trench hit the front page of the paper, and I was painted as some sort of monster. I raced to the site anyway. I knew all safety precautions were going to be thrown out, so I took it upon myself to do a check. From the manager's office, I thought I saw a squatter poking around Fighting Phil. However, when I got down there, no one was there. I took a look at the mooring and the machinery, and everything looked to be in order, but I was no expert. I reported this to Tatum when he arrived, but once again, I was ignored. I also brought Tatum an even worse weather report from the night before that showed winds coming in earlier. He just asked me, "So why aren't we lifting now?" As though we should start before dawn without even warming up the crane. After a quick sweep, the minimum the code requires, we got started, and disaster almost came right away. Micah lost control in the gusts when lifting the first panel and almost plowed it into an apartment building. I had never seen him make such a mistake like that. I started to talk to Tatum, but he shot me a glance that shut me up and shut me down. When it came time for the second lift, the rain was quieting down a bit, but the wind was getting stronger and stronger. Tatum, Grace, and I were in the manager's office, and Grace was concerned. I told them both that I was very worried about the conditions and recommended postponing the second lift until the following day. That was ridiculous, of course, because we all knew the winds would ground us for at least 3 days. But I knew voicing that would guarantee I would get nowhere. So instead, I told Tatum what he already knew, that the load was pushed beyond the limits of the crane, that the roofing panel's shape made it hard to predict how it would react in high winds, and that the ground upon which Fighting Phil stood was getting soft. But rather than listen to me, Tatum convinced Grace to ask Micah his thoughts. Grace said that she couldn't stop the lift without Quinn Baxter's approval, and that she knew Quinn valued my opinion. But I knew I'd be fired on the spot if I tried to stop the lift, so I said nothing. Grace stormed out to watch the lift from below. A half hour later, the lift was stopped when another blasted squatter appeared. Tatum bolted from the booth to confront Grace, and I saw them fighting over the green flag. It looked to me like Tatum was winning, but with all the rain and wind and at that distance, I couldn't really see what was happening. However, I'm pretty sure that I saw Tatum grab the flag from Grace and start waving it in Micah's direction. The rest is horrible history. At the top of the lift, the wind gusted stronger than it had all day, and I saw the roofing panel catch the gale. In seconds, the best crane in the mid-Atlantic was a pile of twisted steel. For all of his bravado and all of his cavalier attitude, this risk-taken and utter disregard for safety had finally caught up with Tatum. Tatum might try to blame this on some phantom effort by London and the squatters, or even God. That's a joke. There's no way that a squatter with a fire axe could bring down an elegantly engineered construction crane. It's just implausible. Tatum thought his legacy was more important than human life. Signed, Emerson Turkin.